everyone, it's Katrina. From having one of the most advanced capital cities in the world to writing poetry, here are 10 fascinating facts you probably didn't know about the Aztecs. Number 10. The lost city of Aztlan. The Aztec people are famous for their capital city of Tenochtitlan, but they were not originally from there. According to their legends and stories, their ancestors came from the lost city of Aztlan, which was a luxurious and wonderful place where everyone was immortal and happy. Aztlan consisted of 7 tribes, and each lived in their own cave and tended to their floating gardens. Food was plentiful and the gods were happy with people, leading many to believe that this may have been the real city of Atlantis. However, in the Codex Alban, the Aztecs in Aztlan lived under a tyrannical elite group, so they escaped and moved south to the basin on May 24, 1064, a very important date in Aztec history. Regardless of why they left Aztlan, led by their god of war, the sun and human sacrifice, Huitzilopochtli, archaeologists have been searching for the lost city in the north, but so far have been unable to find it. There was probably more than one migration, and it is hard to say whether this was a real location or maybe it never existed at all, and is just a place that exists in legends. Number 9. The Mexica. The term Aztec came into popular use by Spaniards after the initial discovery of the civilization. While some of these indigenous people did call themselves Azteca, inspired by the name of their ancestral home of Aztlan, they were mostly known as the Mexica. Around 1250, the Mexica arrived in the Valley of Mexico. It was a very long and difficult migration. When they arrived, this place had already been occupied for thousands of years, most likely due to the wealth of natural resources. They settled in the city of Culhuacan, a prestigious city, and they would help the town in battles. In gratitude, the king of Culhuacan gave them one of his daughters to worship. Instead, they sacrificed her to their god, Huitzilopochtli, and so they were banished to wander in the marshes. Huitzilopochtli appeared to their leaders and told them to look for a sign, a great eagle perched on a cactus killing a snake. The modern Mexican flag features a coat of arms depicting this image. After a time, they came upon Tenochtitlan, where they saw the sign and were finally able to settle. The application of the term Aztec to all Mexica peoples seems to have first appeared in European historical records from the 16th century. Its first use in an influential European text was in a work about the Aztecs that was published in 1780 called La Historia Antigua de México by the Creole Jesuit teacher of New Spain, Francisco Javier Clavijero Echegaray. During the 19th century, the term Aztec became even more popular after being used by my favorite explorer, Alexander von Humboldt, who used Clavijero's work as a source. Finally, in 1843, the word became a mainstay of the English language with the publishing of William Prescott's book, The History of the Conquest of Mexico. The term Aztec, as it's often used today and throughout European history, is slightly misleading, and modern anthropologists and other scholars tend to have varying definitions of the word, which they apply as they personally see fit. So you can too. Number 8. One of the world's biggest cities. Once they found Tenochtitlan, they certainly made the most of it. It was officially founded around 1325 and became the Aztec capital by the late 15th century. At its peak around 1519, the population was several times the size of London, with around 400,000 residents, making it one of the world's largest cities at the time, as well as the largest residential concentration in Mesoamerican history. When Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés saw the city in 1519, he was pretty impressed. In a letter to King Charles I of Spain, he described the architecture and many canals as spectacularly beautiful. One of the conquistadores, named Bernal Díaz del Castillo, later recounted that when the Spanish arrived at the capital, they were in disbelief. He wrote, "Some of our soldiers even asked whether the things that we saw were not a dream." It was very rich and had a thriving marketplace, organized streets and canals, as well as large temples, schools, and even ball courts. As impressed as the Spanish were by Tenochtitlan, they still wanted to teach them a lesson. In 1521, much of the city was destroyed, including hundreds of temples, as well as the palace of Montezuma II, a landmark building which contained over 300 rooms. Now, much of modern-day Mexico City lies over its remains. Number 7. Education. When it came to schooling, the Aztecs, or Mexica, were far ahead of their time. Although the civilization played great emphasis on the importance of parents teaching their children, they were one of the first societies to introduce compulsory education for children, regardless of class. This meant that nobles, commoners, and even slaves went to school. The society's education system was at least partially based on the Huehuelatoli, a collection of Mexica behavioral teachings and legends. All children were to learn about religion, doing penance, physical work, keeping watch at night, and drawing blood from different parts of the body. Remember, they always had to keep Huitzilopochtli happy. Public schools were separated by gender and class, with nobles attending separate institutions. At the Calmecac school, priests taught boys of nobility about music, history, art, and leadership skills. Boys of lower strata attended the Cuicacali school, where they learned primarily about becoming warriors and were trained for possible military service. Education for girls focused largely on cooking, weaving, art, and other domestic duties. Number 6. Chocolate. To the Aztecs, chocolate was considered a gift from Quetzalcoatl, the god of wisdom. Chocolate originated in Mesoamerica and was so valuable, cacao seeds were used as a form of currency for small purchases. Cotton cloth was exchanged for larger purchases. In addition to chocolate's religious significance as a gift from Quetzalcoatl, the cocoa tree was seen as a bridge between heaven and earth. Before a human was sacrificed to appease the gods, chocolate was offered. At children's coming-of-age ceremonies, cocoa beans were given to priest assistants. Couples exchanged cocoa beans during marriage ceremonies and drank a symbolic cup of chocolate. The Aztecs prepared chocolate very differently to what we're used to in modern times. It was often served as a bitter, frothy drink infused with spices and crushed-up cacao seeds. The seeds were often roasted, and the drink commonly contained a foaming agent, toasted corn, and water, as well as vanilla and/or chili. There was an oily layer of cocoa butter at the top of the drink, which the Aztecs used to protect their skin from the sun. They also made wine and other drinks from the white pulp around the seeds of the cocoa pod. Chocolate wasn't customarily sweetened until it was taken back to Europe during the 16th century by the Spanish. There, it also became a popular drink, but was sweetened with sugar that they brought back from their other colonies. Number 5. Polygamy. Aztec men were permitted to practice polygamy, but in doing so they were bound by strict rules. A man only had a marriage ceremony with his first wife, who was considered the main wife. All other wives were recognized in the official records, but were considered secondary or less important than the first wife. Despite this lower ranking, extra wives were still considered a mark of great status and were highly regarded within the culture as they contributed to the family's wealth. Husbands were expected to treat all their wives with equal respect, and although men were considered the head of the household, women were treated well in Aztec society and had some power within their marriages. Adultery by either party was punishable by death, and divorce was only allowed under special circumstances. Number 4. Disease and their downfall. As you probably already know, Europeans brought swords, horses, warfare, and genocide to the New World. Times back then were tough, but the Europeans had something on their side that they didn't even realize: germs. While Hernán Cortés was often admired for his military prowess at the time and alliances with other Native Americans who also wanted to destroy the Aztecs, one of the lesser-known ways the Europeans eradicated the Aztecs was through disease. However unintentional, this certainly aided their desires of conquest. The Spanish were successfully driven away during one of their initial attacks on Tenochtitlan. However, they came back in August of 1521. While there were 508 Spaniards, there were actually 200,000 allies from other Aztec tributary states. It was not hard for him to find allies to fight, and during the siege, much of the population died from hunger and smallpox. In the 5 years following the Spanish invasion of the New World, an estimated 20 million or more indigenous people perished from diseases like mumps, measles, and smallpox. The fall of the Mexica Empire was largely made possible and faster by disease. It is interesting to note, though, that after the fall of the Aztecs and Tenochtitlan, most of the other Mesoamerican cultures remained intact. The tribes allied with the Spanish had much to gain, and the Aztecs were not missed. Number 3. They sold their children. In Aztec society, it was common for impoverished people to sell their children into slavery, or for people to even sell themselves into slavery. These practices were often as a last resort after someone went bankrupt and saw no other way out. In addition to hard work, the income from selling oneself or one's children would provide, perhaps, a bleak light at the end of the tunnel. In other words, the eventual possibility of buying back their freedom. Some people remained slaves their entire lives. While this was not an ideal existence, slaves had some rights within Aztec society compared to others. They were allowed to marry, have children, and own land. Number 2. Detailed records. The Aztecs had an advanced writing and record-keeping system. Their alphabet was a form of picture writing that was based on their language, Nahuatl. Writing was a specialized skill that required training and was done mostly by scribes and priests, which could be men or women. They made calendars, wrote poetry, and kept detailed astronomy, historical, and tax records, as well as information about religious ceremonies and sacrifices. Texts were often compiled into a type of book called a codice. While we always tend to think of war and sacrifice when we think of the Aztecs, there was also song and dance, which were not a part of religious ceremonies. Known as the flower songs, they have their own style, and it is kind of a miracle that they were written down and survive to this day. Paper made from bark or deerskin was used for keeping records. Charcoal was used for writing, which was later dyed with vegetables and other substances. Before the arrival of the Spaniards, almost everything relied on drawings and pictographs, but it was important for them to write down oral history, not just keeping track of taxes and tribute. Number 1. Sacrifice and burial customs. Life and death went hand in hand in Aztec society. Aztecs of high stature, including merchants, were typically cremated. Their belief was that cremation would transform the soul of a dead warrior in a way that would send them straight to one of their religion's 13 versions of heaven. Dogs were sometimes killed and cremated alongside the important deceased person for the purpose of guiding them into the afterlife. When upper-class members of Aztec society died, their wives and slaves were also often buried alive to serve them in the afterlife. Yikes. Most commoners were buried underneath or near their family home. For those of you that are here for the sacrifice, historians believe that the Aztecs sacrificed thousands of people annually, as they saw this as a way to appease the gods, especially Huitzilopochtli, god of war and the sun, and Tlaloc, the rain god. Those who were sacrificed included a wide range of people, including prisoners of war, members of Aztec society, and even children. The priests would create towers and towers of skulls and leave them outside, which would ensure the continued existence of humanity. To them, the bones were signs of life and regeneration, like the first flowers of spring. Sacrifices, as well as other tragic and heroic deaths, such as perishing in battle, were viewed as superior to simply dying of old age, which would send you straight to the underworld. Women who died during childbirth were also hailed as heroes. People who passed away in these so-called noble ways went to one of the 13 paradises. When the Spanish arrived and saw all of this in 1519, while they were impressed with the large, thriving city, they were pretty shocked by this thirst for blood and used it as a justification to destroy them. Thanks for watching! Hope you learned something new today. Would you like to learn more about ancient Mesoamerican civilizations? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.